Welcome to the Conduit Deeper podcast, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the details that surround our current sermon series, from current events to fascinating finds to conversations that take us deeper into the Word. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Deeper Podcast. My name is Mo, Executive Pastor at Conduit Church, joined with our lead pastor, Darren Tyler, as we continue our Jonah series, specifically week 2 in the back half of chapter 1. And you titled this Full Send. And every time I hear full send, I think of that Canadian bro that went viral a bunch of years ago. He would send his snowmobile down the hill off this ramps. He would just say, "Send it."
I totally missed that part of the internet.
Oh my gosh.
I thought you were going to say the Full Send podcast, which is a thing. But
there's that. No, it was this guy, this kid in Canada, man. He was just letting it loose. He'd just send it. That was his big thing. And just ridiculous tricks off of these ramps, these snowmobiles. So full send.
Something to Google should you get bored with our show today. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Full send. Just send it. And then, then our producer Micah went snowboarding this weekend, and he said he had a couple full send moments down the hill.
No injuries though?
No injuries. Thank goodness.
That's a win. Yeah, that's a huge win.
But full send, I mean, it's just a couple words, but it describes a lot. And especially in this story with Jonah and what the Lord told him to do. But you, of course, you're the master of these things, kind of little word play, a word turn. But the send really is what God sent Jonah.
Yeah.
Which was on a journey, and he sent a few things.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was looking through the consistency of the chapter, like sending, right, was it, but because Jonah wouldn't go, right, he had to send a storm, and then he sends a fish. Also, he could send Jonah. Like, Jonah, there's like the hard way and the easy way, and Jonah, we all have that, and Jonah chose the hard way, but either way, it's going to be God's way, which is the beauty of God's sovereignty, right? It's the hard way or the easy way, but either way, it's going to be God's way.
Do you remember the first time you were sent? When you had a call, like, okay, it was your Jonah moment, where you received instructions, like, okay, Darren or Mo, I need you to do this.
I thought you were going to say sent to the principal's office, which I
that too.
Very much remember. Most of those, they kind of run together eventually as a kid. Did you have a principal's thing in your? Oh, of course you had a principal.
I had a principal.
Yeah.
I went to a private Christian school. I had a principal. I remember the first time I got sent to the principal's office.
Mo Teeman sent to the principal's office.
Yeah, dude.
What rules were you violating?
I was second grade, and I gave a kid a wet willy in the bathroom. I thought it was funny.
Was this was before Me Too movement too? So like you were like kind of assaulting his ear? Is that what's happening? Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, man.
I mean, a wet willy, that's...
Stuck my pinky in his ear after I was washing my hands.
And you got sent to the office for that?
And it gets worse, bro.
What kind of a snowflake school was that?
Oh, man. Independent Fundamental Baptist, KJV 1611 only. Rules, baby. And so it got worse from there. I got sent to the principal's office, and then this was a school that had corporal punishment, right?
Wait, was this a Christian school?
Oh yeah.
I think I've missed this part of your childhood.
Yeah. Private Christian school.
An IFB style. Okay, this
100%.
all makes. I'm gonna say wet willy. Good Lord, that was like 14 times a day in my school. Wedgies, I can't say some of the stuff we were doing, but twisting certain things,
It resulted in in getting whooped by the principal.
Oh yeah.
A little paddle. He called Black Beauty.
Was it black?
It was about 14 inches long. Had holes drilled in it.
Wooden?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I got butt whooped on that one.
Ours were made out of repurposed tractor tires. You could cut the rubber off of those things, and oh my God, like just some slapping. So okay, so
there was a full send on that one.
Yeah, full send on your rear end.
Exactly.
Did he two-hand it?
No,
like a baseball bat?
No. But it was bad. You wonder why I'm still a rule follower. I mean, I learned that early.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I don't
Stay
think
within the lines.
Yeah. Yeah, ours, obviously we didn't, I've joked about it, but I mean, our school was staffed by farmers' wives who were supporting their husband's farming habit and teachers who could not get work anywhere else. Our anti-government teacher.
Perfect. That would be me.
Yeah. I mean, we just, that was just our school. Our legally blind art teacher. I know I've joked about that a lot, but it never occurred to me until I was a grown-up that, like, wait, that's kind of weird if your art teacher's blind, the art teacher.
That's amazing.
Blind. But,
no, I'm talking about the time you were sent, like you received instruction, maybe your first mission trip.
Yeah.
The first assignment you were given, it's like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing.
16 years old. The first one that comes to mind when you say that was 16 years old. I was watching, our little youth group was watching the Fire by Night monthly video. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Night spelled N-I-T-E because it was the 80s.
Absolutely.
It's funny, that's actually where I met our friend Jim Weidman was on staff at this church, but I was in Nebraska. And so anyway, in this little monthly video that was sent to youth groups, it was like a video curriculum before anybody even knew what that meant. And all it was like a variety show a la Saturday Night Live with a Christian theme. And of course it was the 80s, so there was a theme every month. But they had a 1-minute segment with a guy named Ron Luce. And it was What's Hot segment. Ron Luce was college buddies with Blaine Bartell, who was the host of the show. Anyway, Ron saying, hey, this summer we're going to go on a missions trip. If you want to go, call this number, 918-491-1891. And I cannot believe I remember that phone number.
What?
I don't know where that came from.
What? He just rattled that off?
918-491-1891 or 1892, one of the two, but it was one of those two. That was, it was his home number, which...
I didn't need to edit this out.
No, he's gone. I mean, this 40 years ago, right? So he's long gone. But actually, someone called that. Tell me if Ron answers.
His grandma.
Tell me if Ron answers. But no, that was. I don't know how. It's like one of the things that I've heard that seems to resonate with me. In my experience, has been that the God, Jeremiah 31. I will write my will on your heart and on your mind, and. A lot of times the way that God leads specifically with a calling like that is that you hear it in your head and it sort of jumps in your heart. You're like, oh, that sounds like... So that's what happened. I didn't have any language for it, so I called that night and I thought, look, if it cost $200 or $300, my dad was unemployed, it was the 80s recession, all that stuff, the cheese planted, closed, nobody had work. And I thought, man, for $300, and I'm an idiot. I don't know what it costs. And it was like $1,500 plus it.
In what, 1986?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money back then. It's more than it is now.
You might, and for me, it might as well have been $1 million.
Right.
And truthfully, it was, it's almost 2 months. It was 7 weeks.
Wow.
I still don't know how they managed to do that.
That's actually impressive.
Yeah. But it didn't matter. I didn't have any money. But that night, Ron, I learned later I was the only person that called. I didn't know that at the time. I thought Ron was this big deal. And there were like 3,000 or 4,000 churches a month that were receiving this video. But it was like a 1-minute segment and he rattled it off. And it was I had to I was the church sound man for the youth group. So I rewound it on the VHS so I could get to the phone number. But yeah, that was, he told me it's $1,500. I'm like, I don't have $1,500. I'm sorry I bothered you. And he said, well, what if somebody paid for it? Would you go? And I'm thinking he's about to offer to pay for my trip.
Yeah.
He'll just comp me, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, of course. That's it. And he said, good, because God, where God guides, God provides. That was the very first time I'd ever heard that phrase. And I don't know. I just took him at face value. That would have been April of 87. And we were leaving in June. I had basically 60 days to figure it out. And and to this day, I say that to people going on a missions trip. Your trip doesn't start the moment you get on the plane. It actually starts the moment you say yes, because God's provision.
Yeah, as Jonah found out when he said no.
Yeah. Yes.
That's where his trip
Yes. Yeah, and I've wondered, because that was where I think I first learned that lesson. God, yeah, sure, he sent me to Guatemala because he loves Guatemalans. He sent me to Guatemala because he loved me, and there was something there that I needed for it. But saying yes to that was, the first time, and I'd never been on an airplane before. I didn't know nothing, and the people around me knew equally nothing. But somehow, and that's to this day, it just, in the same way you learned how to follow rules from getting your butt whooped. We learn other lessons, and I learned this lesson of saying yes, keeping your yes on the table. Works out. It's not comfortable all the time. It doesn't mean it's going to be smooth and easy and all that, but it will work. You'll be in God's will. So yeah, that was mine. What was yours?
It was the time I joined the CIA, and it's not what you think. It was a Bible study group that I started.
I was just there's got to be Christians in Action or something like that. Like
the Bible study group I started in high school called Christians in Action.
It was. That's what it meant. I knew it. I knew it.
Hey, but see,
I grew up in the 80s. I remember.
But see, I really wanted to be a CIA agent as a kid, and I still do. I mean, I of all the movies and the shows that I watch are all CIA, special forces, and I have a fascination with that. So the way for me to kind of tickle that was to call this Bible study group CIA. And it was a church camp that summer before the fall of my junior year, where I was like one of 3 times I've heard the audible voice of the Lord. He said, I'm calling you to ministry. Start a Bible study club at your school this fall. And me and my best buddy, we did just that, man. We launched this little Bible study group our junior year, and it exploded. I mean, we had we would do it every maybe Tuesday or Thursday, I can't remember, every week, and then it led the crescendo of that would always lead to these See You at the Pole rallies.
Oh,
remember those?
Oh yeah, they still do those.
Yeah, and so we would lead that. I would lead worship for that, and then my buddy would give a message. And we were 16, 17, but we were full of Holy Spirit fire at the time, and we had 300 kids showing up. At 16, 17 years old, our own little mini church. It was kind of a while. I look back on it now, thinking
that's bananas. Yeah,
we were getting after it.
Sort of ironic though that your sons would follow through with that and end up with a football Bible study at your house after.
But that is true.
Yeah, because one of the questions I was going to ask you that I literally I can't believe I've never actually asked this before was, you were on a similar trajectory that I was on in that you were volunteering as a youth pastor, but you were feeding your family in the music business. And so when I first reached out, well, actually, just step backwards. When you first came to Nashville and we're talking, you were kind of kicking the tires about coming down here and working, and we met about you working at Platform. What I couldn't have told you at that time was I wasn't going to be there much longer.
Yeah.
And so I just bit my tongue. But then, obviously you came here, and then a few years into your journey here, you're doing design work for, artists that people know their names, and you're managing. There was one of the things you had that I was always jealous of, was you could manage, but you could also, in a pinch, throw some design work in and get some grocery money with it. And I know you always tried to stay away from it because you wanted to be a manager, but you were so good, which is, now if you see any of the graphics for our podcast, most of those right now are created by your son, Gabe. It's kind of funny how your kids follow in your footsteps with that. But when it came to time to say, hey, would you be interested in coming on staff? At that time, we couldn't afford me, let alone you. So it was a very part-time basis. Was that even on your radar, being in ministry? Because you just said a phrase, I was called into ministry. Had you just put that aside and forgotten about it? Or did you know at some point that was coming back around?
That's such a good question. And I've, through this whole Jonah series, I've kind of been wrestling with that a little bit too, kind of playing it back in reverse, because it's very similar to your story in the sense of there was this call that I definitely had as in high school, and then was a part-time youth pastor for a decade, and then a worship pastor for a couple of years too. But then, entered into this world of artist management where it's all business, but I felt like I kind of had a shepherd's heart through all of it, and kind of leading my artists, and go figure that, artist management is a really good proving ground for leading a church in shepherding and pastoring a church.
Yeah, it turns out.
I mean, no one would probably ever have guessed that.
I wouldn't have.
But my goodness. And so I definitely knew that calling was on me, and I justified it, and I don't know if that's the right word, but I felt like I was obedient to what was given to me at the time, the opportunities that I had, and that was to shepherd in a way that looked like artist management in the Christian music industry. And so it wasn't like this, Pastor Mo title. It was Manager Mo. But I always, kind of had, again, this pastor's heart. And I didn't know what that would look like. So when the opportunity presented itself to partner, not as artist managers together, but as co-laborers, as pastors of Conduit Church, the initial reaction was no. Like from a career perspective, on paper, it probably did not look wise. And I remember my wife being like, that's great and all, but how are we going to pay the bills? Because at the time, we were a church of like 150 people.
Oh, yeah. We had a church that size has this dilemma in that we have the needs of a larger church, because we still have needs, but we don't have any way to finance it. Like there's no money for it.
Yeah.
I was still living off of savings and doing consulting work on the side, just trying to stay afloat with it. So you're right, it didn't, on paper, it didn't.
But man, there was just something happening here that I think we were all excited about and felt like the potential was there for this to be a really, really cool thing. And the Lord was moving. And so, yeah, it was for sure a massive step of faith for Jennifer and I, and, two young boys at the time, to kind of figure out like, what's this next season look like for us?
Was there a moment though where you thought, I'm called to ministry, but then you were going to define what that ministry was? This is what I will and won't do? Mm. That was me anyway. I did, as a young man, feel that call to ministry, but I also wanted to define what it was. So for instance, in Guatemala.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've talked about it. Like the second time I went, and by the time the first time I went with Ron, there were 35 kids, and Ron and Katie. And then actually Rob and Debbie Koch, who actually went on to start a church called Shoreline in Austin, Texas, which is a monster church, but they literally were turning over their ministry to Ron and Katie that summer. And anyway, all that to say, they, for those that know or followed Ron Luce at all, the Ron Luce Teen Mania went on to become a juggernaut of the 90s, like Acquire the Fire youth conferences, but it started with 35 kids that summer. Second summer, I'm in Guatemala, and I've got now 6 people from my youth group of 30 people went with me, and which was fun. Like, kids from my hometown, and so I felt like, yeah, I'm making an influence here. But that summer, I didn't want to enjoy it too much because I was afraid God was going to ruin my plans. I vividly remember, don't have fun with this. This is not fun. Because I didn't want to ruin my plans. And my negotiation with God, that was around the time Steve Taylor's, Russ Taff's self-titled record came out. That's what it was. And he recorded it in London. And so in my brain, I thought, I could go to London and be a missionary if that's what God wants. So I was like, compromise. Like, this is my compromise. I'll go, but I'll go where I want to go with it. And
yeah, there'd be like Jonah saying, okay, yeah, I received that assignment, but I want to go to that city and preach the gospel.
Yeah, I'm okay being a prophet, right? 1 Kings 14:25 or 2 Kings 14:25. Jonah was a prophet, but he was way more comfortable being a prophet in Israel than he was in Nineveh. So he was kind of put in those, the language I've used in past now is it was like the artist-writer that we have with an artist, whatever. Cutlass will be there in concert, and here's a list of things they will and won't do, and here's a list of things you will and won't do as a promoter. And I had kind of built this artist-writer for God of what I will and won't do. And 2 of those things, top of the list, I will not be a pastor, I will not be a missionary.
Wow.
Neither one of those things. And in subconscious, but also very conscious of that. And then, so my idea was, I want to write books, I want to smoke a pipe, be thoughtful. I loved the idea of being because I love to travel. So I thought I can be a traveling guy, because I learned by then that you only need like 3 really good sermons. and just do them over and over again. You're like a comedian, you're just doing the same routine over and over. That felt, easy and fun and traveling and yada, yada. And
it was a negotiation.
I thought it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, God, what is the old saying that, man makes his plans and God laughs. And so he let me, do that.
So you talked about Jonah or the Lord sending a storm to Jonah to course correct him, right? For his disobedience. Let's call it what it is, right? So was there a storm that was brewing to course correct you, to get you into your calling?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the longer I was in the music world, because like you, I didn't treat it as just an industry. I remember having a conversation with a manager. Oh gosh, I was going to say his name. I won't say his name. By the way, good guy. But he said, it was, I don't know what year it was, but it was like yet another artist was having to cancel their tour because they were naughty. And this manager made the comment that, well, look, that's why they have a pastor. I'm not the pastor. I'm the manager. They need it. I'm like, well, in my mind, I'm thinking that sounds good on paper, but then you put them on the road for 300 days a year. They don't have a pastor.
Yeah, there's some culpability there.
Yeah. And so in that world, I began to receive what you just described, the training. It was kind of like Moses, right? So the Bible, like he spent 40 years in Egypt, and then 40 years in the desert, and then obviously the rest of his life. But the training he had in Egypt was the exact training he needed, because when God said, write this down, he could. He was in the culture that invented papyrus, like written. I mean, he could write. He was literate. Like, okay, so that's a big deal. And then 40 years in a desert, that is exactly where God needed. He was like the Bear Grylls of his time. He knew how to survive in the wild. So when it came time to get, which is why it matters that it took him 40 years in the desert, because it shouldn't have taken 40 years. He knew the way God was doing it. But the point is, there was a training that was happening for him, and that's the same training that was happening for me. But when it was time to go, the storm started for me in 2008. Well, a lot of people, the storm started in 2008, right? The financial collapse happened. And suddenly, artists and tours that should have been and historically were just crushing. I was getting crushed working. And we had multiple jet streams, but it felt like, probably like Noah, that everything was rocking, and I couldn't get my balance. And it was a good 2 or 3 year run during that storm. And it was like, on the one side, we were still doing well, but it is. It's one thing if you're doing well financially, but it's quite another when you've got artists going, "Hey, man, why do you suck all of a sudden as a manager? I thought you were this genius. Why did 400 people show up in this 2,000 seat auditorium? Those were some stormy days that were blowing me. And here's what I would equate that to, and I'll be interested if this happened with you, but like Noah. I got to quit saying Noah. It's all the rain getting on my property. Like Jonah, the storm was preventing me from going any further away. Like it stopped me from going too far. Like he never made it to Tarshish, 2,500 miles away. He made it a long way. So I don't know how far I would have made it without those storms before it forced me to say, I've got to do something. I've got to get out of this boat.
Yeah, I mean, thinking through this teaching, it brings up a pretty deep topic of sovereignty versus free will here, right? It can be one and the same a little bit, but this idea of are these storms from God? Are these storms self-made? Is the storm the Satan enemy? Like, how do we discern those? When we're feeling like we're in the middle of a storm, everything's blowing around, you're getting wet, you're drenched, you're drowning, it's confusion and chaos, and you're trying to make sense of the storm and you're pushing through, how can we know if that's something the Lord sent us? How do we know it's something that we've sailed ourselves into? How do we know if it's the enemy distracting?
I mean, the simplest way I know to put it is a storm from Satan is meant to destroy you. A storm sent from God is meant to develop you. Now, in both instances, God isn't going to waste them. You know, when you look at what happened with Job, Satan went to God, made this cosmic bet, but that was Satan was doing that to Job, and it was not meant to develop him, it was meant to destroy him. God did not waste it either way. So God's sovereignty in that is that when Satan, there's nothing that Satan does here that God does not allow. So whether he causes it or allows it, sometimes I feel like the argument is a moot one. But where it does matter is in the purpose of it. Like the storm for Jonah was meant to develop him, not destroy him. Like it wasn't meant to kill or crush. It was just meant to stop, strengthen, and develop him. And so I think it matters in that either way God is going to use it for my good and for his glory. But it also helps just to know that either way, we are going to be, and we get that chance, the old saying, we get to either become bitter or become better. And Jonah, like a lot of us, we didn't quite choose the better yet, which is why God sent a fish, right? He could have sent who knows? He could have sent a million ways to rescue him. He could have transported him. There's biblical examples of that, where he was and he was not, He could have transported him, but he didn't. He's in the sea, and now God sends a great fish to swallow him because Jonah had not quite figured out that he needed to cry out to God instead of trying to figure it out himself.
You mentioned Noah, and you've slipped up a few times during
I don't know why
series.
I keep doing that. It's embarrassing.
Well, I mean, it's similar, and quite frankly, their stories are similar. They both were tasked with something. And Noah was obedient before the storm came, and it saved him. It saved humanity.
Right.
I also found that Jonah means the name Jonah means dove.
Yeah.
Holy
wild to
Spirit.
say, yeah.
Right? Symbolic for the Holy Spirit. Symbolic for a lot of things in Scripture.
Yeah.
But dove or peace. Interesting that Noah, there was a dove at the end of that story.
Right. Sent out the dove, the Holy Spirit came back. Yeah.
It's interesting that they kind of intertwine a little bit.
Yeah.
One made an obedient decision, the other made a disobedient decision at first.
And both, in different ways, a picture of Christ and the gospel. The word ark, Hebrew word, is actually a word that means coffin.
Yeah. Wow, yeah.
Into the coffin, there's only one way in and only one way out. It's a picture of the gospel. The wood, the whole thing, even the way it's held together with pitch. There's a whole picture of the gospel. And the same thing with Jonah. It's not the boat, so it's not called an ark there because it wasn't that. It was an actual boat. But Jesus would say, right in the book of Matthew, that just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man go into the, so both were a picture of the gospel to come. They just thought they were trying to survive another day. And the big picture of God's sovereignty is that, oh, no, way bigger things going on here than just you and me. Way bigger things.
One of the things that that I negotiated with, at least in my heart, is, coming on staff here 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, was, man, I'm not going back into youth ministry. Like, you can call me to anything, but don't call me back into youth ministry. I did that for a decade, and it just beat the tar out of me. It was hard. But two things happened. One, he did call me into youth ministry, and I've been a football coach for the past decade of my life, which we're the same age, right? It's like these young teenage, impressionable young men who it's more than just being a football coach to me. It is pouring into these kids' lives,
Right.
Which is kind of funny. It's just a different way of looking at it. But here at Conduit, thankfully, didn't ask me to be a youth pastor because
I thought about it.
Oh man, pushed against that. But he brought us a youth pastor over time. I mean, we had obviously Jim and Donna Henderson led us at first. And then as we begin to grow, we needed someone else to step into that role that was socially conservative, theologically conservative, young, hip, and cool. And, he brought us the Kellys.
Yeah.
Joel and Michaela Kelly, who have now been leading our youth for 7.5 years, almost 8 years. And part of the sending on this past Sunday, and I love how the Holy Spirit orchestrated this passage and this series in this season that we're in as Conduit, because we're sending them out to start a church.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, God is a sending God, right? And we watched Joel and Mick, have a similar story of, Joel actually grew up more theologically similar to you than I, but he came on board, do the student ministry. And most people probably don't know this, but the average shelf life of a youth pastor in our modern era is, it's like a couple of years.
Max.
Yeah.
That's probably being pretty gracious.
Yeah, it's hard. It doesn't pay great. And, you've got, on the one hand, parents who are very concerned and aware of what's going on in their kids, which is a good thing, right? And then you've got parents, that have lots of opinions. And so it makes it hard because you've got the kids that want one thing, parents want a different. So you find yourself caught in the middle a lot. And of course, it's kids. So there's just a lot of hormones flying around, a lot of drama.
It's like, layered and complicated.
Oh, golly, yeah. And
a sixth grader is way different than a senior. Completely season of life.
Yeah.
Season of life.
And yet they're somehow supposed to reach them all. So they're and weirdly enough, that does make them uniquely qualified. It's why I think a lot of former youth pastors or kids pastors, for that matter, make good senior pastors because they're used to reaching people who are not from their context. It's like their own missions trip. These are not my people, but I'm called to these people. But it became obvious over the years that God was growing Joel in a very specific way. I don't know how many youth pastors in Nashville, let alone America, spend 4 hours on a Friday going through systematic theology with a pastor. That's just what our next gen ministry guys do. But it was time where he was either going to go, and they were feeling it. They were feeling the stirring inside that you begin to feel, and starting to even look at opportunities outside the church. Different things, which is fine. If God calls, we're all about that. We believe that God is a goer, right? He's a sender. So as we were then trying to figure out what we were going to do, as we were seeking the Lord as elders, we said it over and over again. We do believe it's time to plant a church, but if we don't have a person, then why would we can't? It doesn't matter if we don't have the right pastor for it. And literally right under our nose is Joel. And I don't know why it took me so long to even look towards Joel with it. I do know why. I didn't want to lose him as a youth pastor. He was doing such a great job. So I think subconsciously I didn't want to lose that. And God, of course, has provided, with Josh Wooten, Lena Wooten. So God is so good. Like we're not only going to be fine, we're going to thrive in that. But yeah, it became time to say, okay, we need to send them. And of course they have to say yes. They did. And we announced on Sunday that we're going to send out our first church plant here. We've sent them all over the world, dozens and dozens. I think we're well over 100 churches now that have been planted, that we have planted. It's probably time for us to plant one in America. And yeah, that's happening. Like literally we announced it. Great response so far. And hopefully people in our church family will be listening to the voice of God. And if he is sending them to go, that they will go. That's all we're asking. Joel is being sent, but he's not being sent alone. But we believe that there are people that God is going to speak to that need to say yes to go with them to plant this new church.
Yeah, I think it's important to encourage those listening that sometimes the sending or the going doesn't have to be across the globe. It can be across the street.
Yeah,
it can be down the road. And that's part of this. That's part of the going. I think there's maybe, a contingency of people that maybe feel some relief in that. Like, okay, well, I have the passion, the gifting, the calling of a missionary, but man, it just seems, I don't have $1,500 to go to Guatemala. I don't have $4,000 to go to Uganda, or whatever it might be. The time, maybe the season of life, whatever it is, but they have this heart to be the hands and feet. And so they see an opportunity of serving in their community in whatever way that looks like. And in this case, it's maybe planting a flag in the ground for this idea of what a Conduit Church looks like, that's just down the road in the community that they live in, and just come alive at that opportunity.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sweat equity in Conduit by loading and unloading a trailer every Sunday morning, setting up and tearing down, and the community that came out of that, just with the people you're serving with, people that you met for the first time. You're now kind of, you will always be forever connected in that season where you're throwing gear around and setting up, because it was such a special time of starting a new work. And there's something really special that happens there organically that I love.
Yeah, people that were there will talk about how much they missed that time. Now, I have a vivid enough memory to remember, and you also were complaining quite a bit about it. So it wasn't, let's not remember it like
revisionist history.
Yeah, too romantically here. But there was something in that did build a character and determination in us, because every Sunday it had to happen. So the trailer had to get backed up, the trailer had to get unloaded, we had to set it up, had to tear it down, had to be out of there by 1 o'clock every week, for 4 years.
Yeah.
With it. But there was a beautiful time of, you, Juilliard, Henderson, so many that were there. Carrie Anderson was, in that mix. There were people that were so faithful that made it happen that I'll forever be grateful for it. And that's an opportunity that's about to happen right now, a community that's forged in mission. Mm-hmm. That common mission of planting a church here is just as important as planting a church in Bokukutu, Uganda. Last week we, through our baptisms, one of our baptisms was my former neighbor. They're still at the same neighborhood I moved out of, but Megan Smith, which I had not heard all of her story. I knew some of it, but so right here in Williamson County, Franklin, Tennessee, is someone getting just swept up in New Age, the New Age movement, the demonic side of that, and that's happening all over. I know plenty of people that are getting swept into that, and for her to be able to testify that it was destroying her life and that Christ transformed her life and being baptized her without this church, that was the tool and the mechanism that God used. So there was a life, a family, children, right, that are changed now because, you said yes, right? I said yes. Had we have said no, I don't know the consequences of that. But now Joel saying yes, Joel and Mick, there are future Megans out there whose lives depend on them saying yes. And that's right here in Middle Tennessee. So I'm excited for the courage that they've had to do that. I'm encouraged that there are those in our church family that are willing to go, because it's a sacrifice. I mean, when you leave, just like Jonah, he would have left his friends. He had to leave behind. We don't know what his family situation was, but he had to leave what was comfortable to him. And there are those that if God's calling you, that's probably going to be one of the first things. Like, yeah, but my kids have friends here. Like, I have a life here in this church, and that's true. So you have to know that if God is saying, yes, I'm going to send you out of that, He has something there that you need there that you couldn't get here. And those that are saying yes, I can't promise what it is other than I know that God is faithful. And just like with Jonah, just like with me, just like with Mo, right, that there's something on the other side of that yes that will be way greater than you could imagine or dream.
I remember when we decided to move to Nashville, and that was the second time I audibly heard from the Lord was, it's time to go. I remember calling you like the next day to say, hey, Darren, we've decided we're moving to Nashville. We've got a for sale sign in the yard. Can't wait to talk about what it'll look like to work together. And I will never forget this. I don't know if you remember this, but you said, I can't believe you called me because you're not going to believe me when I tell you this, but your name is on a list of people to call today to let them know that I'm resigning from my company and I'm starting a church.
Yeah, I vividly remember it. Yeah.
I remember hanging up the phone so confused, thinking, well, I thought maybe I would be working with Darren Tyler in platform management down in Nashville at some point. But that's all going away because he's starting a church? What?
Yeah.
What is this about? And it was just a wild turn of events. It was like a plot twist, right? And so to come down and, fast forward, obviously, the Lord had a plan on the other end of that to where, we would be working together and it looking very different than either of us would have thought.
That's the beauty of the sovereignty of God, though. Like you asked about that question, but that's the beauty of it. If you will, like I said on Sunday, offer your life as a living sacrifice, then you will know his will for your life, right? Those verses 1-3 of Romans 12. It just works out. There's no other way to say it. If you'll go there, God, whatever you want. For me, that meant tearing up my writer was the only language I knew, right? Okay, here's what I will and won't do. Here's what, God, I will let you and won't let you do. And by the way, that presumes that I know better than God. Like that's the pride of that. The reason we had a writer for an artist is because the promoter does not know the artist. So we have to say, hey, this guy's got a gluten allergy or whatever, and because the promoter doesn't know. The promoter doesn't know what kind of electricity is required to run this sound system. So that's the writer. So when I put a writer in front of God, it's me saying to God, I know better than God. I got a better plan. Here's. I know you know me, God, but I know me way better. So I don't want to go to Africa. I don't want to start a church. I want to manage rock bands because that's who I am.
Right.
When you finally tear all that up, it doesn't come overnight. At least for me, it didn't. But when I finally got to that point, which I think is what happened with Jonah in the whale, right? Was he finally said, okay, God, I don't care. Save me. That's the full surrender to Christ. And then it just works out. Like he moves the pieces in a way that, again, not comfort. It's not a life of ease, but it is a life of peace and of knowing that you are doing like this fulfillment and purpose. And I do remember that. Was that fall of 2009?
Absolutely was. Yeah. October of 2009.
Yeah. So I would have just told my clients, and I didn't know you were moving here, I don't think, at that point.
No, we had just made that decision.
Yeah. So I had two lists that I was working at that point. Okay. One was my industry contacts, because I had about a 48-hour window to control the narrative and to tell my artists one at a time, so they felt like they heard it from me. But which meant I had to do it quickly, because we know how that goes. Like, lead singer goes home, tells his wife, the wife calls the wife of the merch guy goes like, oh my God, and calls the lead singer of another band that you haven't even told yet. So we had 24 hours. We gave ourselves 24 hours and
wildfire. And
then the next phase was calling colleagues, the people that I enjoyed working with, that I was honored. You were on that list, Mark Klassen. There were several people that I really had enjoyed working with over the years that I wanted to be the one to hear from me. But I had no idea you were coming here. But it is funny when you said yes to coming on board. There was like, this feels right, on the church side, because when it came to the management side, I thought that too when we first met. I thought, man, this would be so much fun. This could be, so awesome. But it just, I was leaving, so I couldn't, I hire you and then be gone. How cruel, would that be? And so here it is. Yeah. Almost 20 years later since we met, but do you say 11 years? You're so much better with dates since you came on staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2014. It's 2025 for the record, for those listening and pay attention.
Right.
I have been screwing up my dates all January, February. I keep forgetting it's 2025.
Yeah.
It's wild. I was thinking about the first time I actually went on a missions trip. I was youth pastor. I was probably 23 years old, leading a handful of teenagers to Juarez, Mexico.
Juarez, home of Gustav and Linda
Rojas, fellow Conduit family. But that probably wasn't the best place to go to. I mean, Juarez is like a drug.
It's cartel central.
Yeah. I didn't know that. And so we partnered with an organization, and we drove in a 15-passenger van from Cincinnati to El Paso.
That's like 24 hours.
Correct. So a lot of sightseeing. And
I'll bet that van smelled so bad.
Yeah, so like when Audio Adrenaline put out that song, what was it, 15 kids in an old church van or whatever it was, something like that.
I don't even remember that.
Oh, you don't remember that song
No.
by the Audio Adrenaline?
It must not have been during my era.
I was like, I resonate with that song. Then we get to the border, El Paso border is, on the other side of the Rio is Juarez.
Yeah.
And man, I remember thinking, what have I done?
Yeah.
Like that was kind of scary.
Yeah.
That was my first time ever leaving the country, was going through Border Patrol, which at that time there was actually pretty decent Border Patrol.
Yeah, that was back when the borders were guarded.
And into Mexico. When we built, we call them houses, but they were cinder block. I mean, the size of a shed, basically, cinder block little homes for people. From a shanty to a cinder block home. It was a pretty big deal for those folks, and it was an amazing time, but it was super scary. That was the first time I ever went on a missions trip, and the second time I ever went was like 13 years later when you dragged my butt to Haiti, and that was scary. That will forever mark my heart for one of the scariest trips I've ever been on in my life.
And that was before
it got bad.
Before it got scary, yeah.
It was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
in fairness, I had been enough that I had gotten used to.
Oh, totally.
The chaos.
I just had to trust you. Full send.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I was proud of you for saying, yes, because it wasn't like a job requirement, but it also is very much a job enhancment, so you can figure out
great.
like what drives.
Yeah, I mean, brought a lot of
mission.
clarity to understand all the different things that we're doing, in Haiti.
Yeah.
But man, Haiti is like no other place on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, the two, obviously the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere by far, which is saying a lot in a hemisphere that has Cuba, right? I mean, by far. And it's just chaos from the ground up. And I have wanted to quit Haiti so many times over the years because it's maddening.
Well, and then I think of, I just mentioned Audio Adrenaline and Mark Stewart and Will McGinnis, who were called to, Joppa with their friends and family to lead the orphanage there.
Right.
Which is down the road from the work that we have, Restoration Church.
And by the way, it was a complete God incidence, by the way, that it ended up in Joppa, because I didn't even know that was where the Hands and Feet Project was based. I booked those guys.
Right. Oh yeah. Long years of relationship there.
I just knew it was Haiti. I didn't know. But we met LaFleur completely separate from Audio Adrenaline, completely separate from Hands and Feet Project. But he happened to be from Joppa. And that was it. I bumped into Mark at a Starbucks, and we were both headed to Haiti the next day. And I was like, oh man, I hadn't seen him in a while. And I was like, and we got to talking, and I realized he said something about Joppa. Like, wait a minute, that's where you guys are in Joppa? Where in Joppa? And then I realized we're like literally 10 minutes from each other. And that's very rare, by the way, because Haiti is not a large country, but it's very spread out. And so, I know that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of missionaries all over Nashville that work in Haiti, and I don't know where any of them are, and none of them are in Joppa, but would that just happen to be where we are? So that was kind of a fun full circle moment.
It's a wild spot, right? Because it's like, the Lord asking Jonah to go to Nineveh, and he's like, you can send me anywhere, but I ain't going there.
Yeah.
That place, there's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of similar to say, all right, I need you to go to Port-au-Prince. You can send me anywhere else in the world, but I'm not going to Port-au-Prince.
Yeah, and keep sending me there. Like it's so frustrating because just the with that. Well, I guess that's a whole other episode. But the government situation, the cultural situation, the corruption. It's everything that just punches me right in the common sense button, and yet God keeps us there. There was a guy a long time ago. He said, God released me from Haiti. I'm like, whoa, talk to me about that. How do you get that?
Where do I sign up for that one?
I didn't know that was an option. You can just quit. Like, I didn't know that was an option. And the answer is, for us anyway, it's not an option. Like, it's not about whether it's hard or easy. It's about whether it's God's will. And that's the only litmus test. And to your point, not everybody is called to Haiti. That's okay. You shouldn't feel guilt in fact, if you go to Haiti and you're not called there, you should feel guilt about that. You should only go where God is calling you to go. And if everybody went to Haiti, who would go to Place of Hope to work with the drug addicts, right? Who would work with the pregnancy centers? Like God gives us each specific callings and hearts for specific things. And if we all just say yes to what he's asked us to do, the world will be turned upside down for the gospel. In fact, I think one of the biggest problems in the world right now is there's a lot of people sitting on a calling from God right now that you haven't said yes to. And because of that, not only are you suffering, the people on the other side of that are suffering unnecessarily because you've simply said no to God's calling on your life. That simple yes, whether it is working with our kid ministry here or our student ministry or coaching football or whatever it is, if you'll just say yes to that, and you don't have to have it all figured out. It's just literally the next right thing. I think that a lot of times I've watched it happen over and over again. Somebody, they got a passion so fighting sex trafficking has become very prominent in our country. Good, awesome. And so many times people think, then I have a heart for this. I need to start an organization. Get my 501c3, get my website, instead of just saying, well, what if I just do the next right thing and then allow whatever happens to grow out of that to grow out of that? Like I think it was Bob Goff said, I don't know, that maybe we don't need any more 501c3s. Maybe we just need a bunch of people saying yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree. And if a 501c3 grows out of that, great. If not, that's not the goal. The goal was never to start an organization. The goal was just to say yes to Jesus. And sometimes an organization is necessary for it. Probably most times it's not. I believe heaven is going to be full and populated of celebrating people that simply said yes to working in the parking lot at a church on a Sunday so that somebody could get in this door that will then donate $25,000 to set slaves free. And God knew that that car that didn't get sent away that Sunday at Conduit Church because somebody said yes to the parking lot, they get the same reward as the person that gave it, as the person that set it free, because God, he's just so good. So it isn't about comparing to other callings. It's literally compared to your calling. And are you saying yes to what God is asking you to do?
Speaking of being sent, you're about to be sent to Israel in a couple days. Tell us about the trip. Where are you headed? What specifically will you be seeing, doing?
Yeah, we're going to play. I actually just saw the itinerary this morning. I think it's the Tuesday after we get there. There's actually a pickleball night.
Oh, come on.
I know. I almost didn't tell you.
Are you serious? Why did you tell me this?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
On the Conduit Church pickleball court.
Oh my gosh, dude.
But
this is punching me right in the...
I'll send pictures. Hey, but if you and Jen go with me in 2026...
I mean, we're signed up.
I know.
We're ready.
Yeah, you'll get to play. So bring your gear.
It's need there not to be, mass chaos.
Yep. Me too, right? We will be going back to an Absor. I'm taking Shannon with me this time. Spending some time, with the Gepners, with that, with the entire kibbutz. In fact, I'm excited to see a lot of the security equipment that's been purchased that we've financed for their little village.
Yeah.
So we'll spend quite a bit of time there. We're also going to head north to the Golan Heights. I have a personal goal to get past. I don't think it's going to happen, but God, it would be great. I've always wanted to go past Mount Hermon into Syria.
Like cross the border?
100%. Don't know if it'll be possible because the government, I don't even know what's going on with the government in Syria. I just know that Israel has set up forces inside of Syria right now to protect from whatever comes after Assad's fall.
Why are you wanting to venture up there? Like, what's the just to say you cross through Mount Hermon?
It's such a significant biblical spot,
For sure.
and just to touch my feet on the ground of
Who controls Mount Hermon right now? Israel, right? Yes.
the UN technically
The UN.
does. If my understanding is it might be the only mountain in the world that has this controlled by the UN,
Isn't that interesting?
right? Yeah,
That's a whole other podcast.
Somebody get the blurry creature boys in here. But we will at least be up on the border there. Hopefully getting to connect with some pastors from Syria that will meet us at the border. Because there's a Christian population in Syria.
Yeah.
That is, their lives are uncertain right now. Assad, for all of his demonic, maniacal behavior, at least did not punish Christians. You could be a Christian in Syria under certain circumstances. Honestly, sometimes easier than in Israel. So we'll do that. We're going to meet with some of the IDF folks while we're there, and we'll hit some sites as well. We're going to go. We'll spend a few days in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Zev Orenstein, City of David. Meet up with some other pastors from other parts of the United States.
Yeah, if there's like a scavenger hunt, I've got a couple items for you that I want you to send back. One of them is just a video or a picture. I'll be satisfied with a picture, I guess, of you on the pickleball court. I would much rather like a video of you actually
Playing pickleball. That's probably not going to happen.
Dude, I can't believe I'm missing this. This is killing me. And then also, I want a selfie of you next to a red heifer. Can you find the red heifers? Where are the red heifers?
They are very protected and very hidden.
Well, I mean, if you're going to climb Mount Hermon, you can find a red heifer.
Funny you say that. So the first 4 days are with City Serve, with Todd Lamphere, and that organization.
Yeah.
It's like Daniel Klein from Catalyst organization will be there. A guy from Museum of the Bible will be there.
They know people.
But Catherine, we'll pick up. So we're done with City Serve on Thursday. Friday, I meet up with Catherine, and she actually has on the agenda a specific spot to talk about the red heifer.
Come on.
The red heifer prophecy.
I knew it.
She is the Jewish conduit, man. She is one of us, man. I remember the last time we were there, she was talking about that she and her little Bible study in their spare time have spent time looking for holes in the fence to Jordan because they very literally believe in the biblical prophecy that Jews fleeing to Petra when it all goes down. So they're very literal about it there. And so we're going to talk about the red heifers. And if I get a chance, absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely. And leave it, for those that don't know, the red heifers were bred in Texas. Leave it to Texas to figure out, hey, we're going to put red heifers so we can get the biblical prophecies. And so maybe I'll get me a selfie with a red heifer. That's hilarious.
Do you think Catherine has an opinion? I'm sure she does. As we wrap this up here, what would be her opinion on Trump's idea around Gaza? She lives there. She doesn't live in Gaza, but she lives in Israel. I'd be curious on her take there in the homeland of what's being discussed regarding Gaza right now.
Yeah, so it's risky to put words in anybody's mouth, right?
True. That's true. That's fair.
But because we know each other and have spent a lot of time in buses and vans, and I would suspect she feels exactly the way that we do, which is do not divide the land. That's God's command. And he has plenty of curses for those that divide the land. So the United States taking control of Gaza would be dividing the land. To put that in real world, I remember George Bush the first being a part of dividing the land, like pulling people out of what they call them settlements, because it's like it's the idea that then they're occupying the land. It's a very intentional word cooked up by UN and progressives and Bush in one of his land for peace deals. There like evening news back when people watched the evening news, people being pulled out of their homes, crying and sobbing, so that they could divide the land, so that Palestinians would give them peace. And of course, they gave them the land and no peace. And George Bush went into that election, 92. People don't remember this, or maybe you do. He went into that election with an overwhelming support. The Gulf War, kicking butt, taking names. So he went into an election that he couldn't lose. And he ended the election with one he couldn't win. And I don't think you can ignore the fact that his dividing the land played a huge part in that God says, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Very specific prophecies about dividing the land and what will happen to those that divide the land. Yeah,
I'm curious to kind of hear the feedback once you get back as to what the conversations are, and not to mention there's a deadline that's in place for Saturday, the day you fly out.
Yeah,
there's a pretty hefty deadline that Trump and Netanyahu that he has repeated yesterday, that the hostages must be returned, or else. Now, there's some ambiguity on what hostages they're talking about specifically. How many? All of them? The next phase? Because Hamas has kind of delayed and they've missed deadlines up to this point.
They're playing games. They're literally doing what Hamas has always done. They're playing games.
So over the next 4 or 5 days, the next week could look a little tenuous potentially.
Yeah, I mean, currently, Wall Street Journal this morning reporting that Israel has canceled all leave for those IDF troops that were on leave.
Wow.
And calling up those, or canceling those who were supposed to go on leave, calling those back who are already on leave, and amassing forces on the Gaza border. So literally right where we're going to be.
Right as you're heading over there.
It's pretty good timing when you think about it.
As the war correspondent in you is just, again, this is part of the sovereignty of God.
It's his goodness. No, but I get to be there.
You get to be
I mean, that
right
sounds,
there.
I don't mean to be glib, but it is perfect timing for me to be over there to get a front row seat. But my hope is that these knuckleheads will come to their senses, because I personally think that Netanyahu has acquiesced on this deal knowing that Hamas would renege, so that he could go in there and finish. He's bought himself the political capital now to go in there and finish what he started.
Sure.
And to President Trump's credit, there is a giant rebuilding project that will need to be undertaken. I just don't think that it's going to be Trump. And by the way, I don't think he thinks that either.
No, I think it's just strategy.
I can't believe that the guys at CNN still fall for that. Like, we've had how many years of this, and you're still falling for it. Now, that said, the hopeful thing about that is they fall for it, which means that these jerks in Hamas, if they're watching international coverage with Al Jazeera or whatever, they might be believing it, and so that might cause them to. It certainly has caused everybody, multiple other of our enemies to back off because they're afraid of him. So maybe that'll do it. But yeah, we'll be there and continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for peace in Beirut. Pray for peace through the Middle East.
Pray for safe travels for you and the team. That'll be an exciting trip, no doubt about it. We're going to continue in Jonah this week. Joel's going to be teaching. Speaking of Joel, he's going to be leading us through chapter 2 of Jonah, and in the following week, I'm going to start chapter 3. And leave you with a chapter and a half when you get back.
Yeah.
So we can finish up the book of Jonah, which, is such a small it's such a small book, only 4 chapters, but there's so much in it. There's a lot of life lessons.
Yeah.
And here we are, thousands of years later,
yeah,
gleaning from the lessons learned by Jonah.
And I will be thousands of years later standing in the port of Joppa, which still exists to this day. It's in Tel Aviv.
It's another selfie right there.
Oh, yeah, the Joppa selfie.
Yeah,
I'll have to think about
Joppa
that.
Absolutely.
Someone
Make
make
you
a
a
note.
list.
Yeah, give me a note.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Deeper Podcast. So glad that you listen. And those of you that watch on YouTube, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, we ask that you do. Maybe leave a comment. If you have any prayer requests, you have any questions about anything that we're discussing, feel free to email us, info@conduitchurch.com. And all the information that you could possibly want to know about what's happening here at Conduit is on our website, conduitchurch.com. Have a great week.